December 10, 1982. Three friends walk out of a bar in Chocowinity, North Carolina, climb into a 1975 Chevrolet Camaro, and drive into the night. They never make it home. For 42 years, their families wondered what happened. Did they have an accident? Were they victims of foul play? Or did they simply choose to disappear? The answer lay hidden beneath the murky waters of Jack's Creek, just a few miles from where they were last seen alive. What started as a night out between friends became one of North Carolina's longest-running missing persons cases, haunting the small community of Beaufort County for over 4 decades. Before we dive into this case, make sure to like this video and subscribe. This is a story that will stay with you long after it ends. In February 2024, an amateur investigator with a remote-controlled boat would finally solve a mystery that had stumped law enforcement for generations. What he discovered beneath the surface would bring closure to 3 families and reveal the tragic truth about that December night in 1982. William Clifton was 30 years old, a man in his prime with his whole life ahead of him. At 24, David McMicken was the youngest of the group, full of energy and dreams for the future. Michael Norman, 32, was the eldest, a respected member of the Beaufort County community. These weren't strangers who happened to meet that night. They were friends, men who knew each other well and had spent countless evenings together. December 10th, 1982, started like any other Friday night in small-town North Carolina. The 3 men had made plans to visit a local establishment in Chocowinity, a tiny community nestled along the Pamlico River. Chocowinity, with its population of just over 1,000 residents, was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where a night out meant seeing familiar faces and catching up with neighbors. The bar they chose was a popular local spot, the kind of establishment that served as an unofficial community center where working men gathered after long weeks to unwind and socialize. Witnesses later recalled seeing the 3 friends that evening, describing them as being in good spirits, enjoying drinks and conversation like any other night out. As the evening wound down, the 3 men prepared to leave. They walked out into the crisp December air, their breath visible in the cold. William Clifton's 1975 Chevrolet Camaro sat waiting in the parking lot, a classic muscle car that was Clifton's pride and joy. The deep blue vehicle with its distinctive racing stripes was well known around town. The plan was simple. Drive home, probably continuing their conversation from the bar, maybe making plans for the weekend ahead. It was a routine they'd followed countless times before. Clifton slid behind the wheel, with McMicken and Norman settling into the passenger seats. The engine roared to life, and they pulled out of the parking lot onto the quiet rural roads that connected the small communities of Beaufort County. That was the last time anyone saw William Clifton, David McMicken, and Michael Norman alive. When the 3 men failed to return home that night, their families initially weren't alarmed. Perhaps they'd decided to continue the evening elsewhere, or maybe they'd stayed overnight with friends. But as Saturday stretched into Sunday and phone calls went unanswered, concern began to mount. By Monday, December 13th, their families knew something was terribly wrong. These were responsible men with jobs, families, and commitments. They wouldn't simply vanish without explanation. The Beaufort County Sheriff's Department was contacted, and one of the county's most enduring mysteries began. The Beaufort County Sheriff's Department launched their investigation immediately, treating the case with the urgency it deserved. 3 grown men don't simply disappear without a trace, especially not in a tight-knit rural community where secrets are hard to keep. Investigators began by retracing the men's steps from that final evening. They interviewed the bartender and patrons who had been at the establishment that night, trying to piece together the trio's state of mind, their conversations, and any potential conflicts or unusual interactions. Everyone agreed. The 3 friends had seemed perfectly normal, enjoying a typical night out with no signs of distress or trouble. The search for the distinctive blue Camaro began immediately. Law enforcement officers scoured the rural roads between Chocowinity and the men's homes, looking for any sign of an accident. They checked ditches, wooded areas, and any place a car might have gone off the road during a winter night. Local volunteers joined the effort, forming search parties that combed through forests and fields. Investigators explored every possible scenario. Had the men been victims of a robbery gone wrong? The early 1980s saw rising crime rates even in rural areas, and 3 men leaving a bar might have seemed like easy targets. Were they involved in something illegal that had caught up with them? Investigators found no evidence to support either theory. The families of William Clifton, David McMicken, and Michael Norman were devastated, but determined. They provided investigators with detailed information about their loved ones' habits, friends, and routines. They organized their own search efforts, posting flyers and keeping the case in the public eye. The 3 men were described as hardworking, family-oriented individuals with no known enemies or involvement in criminal activities. As weeks turned into months, the case began to grow cold. Without the car or any physical evidence, investigators had little to work with. They continued to follow up on tips and reported sightings, but none led to any concrete evidence. Some witnesses claimed to have seen the distinctive Camaro in various locations, but these sightings were never verified. The Beaufort County community was shaken by the disappearance. In a small rural area where violent crime was rare, the vanishing of 3 local men was unprecedented. Theories abounded among residents. Some believed the men had met with foul play. Others wondered if they might have had an accident in one of the area's many waterways. Despite the dedicated efforts of law enforcement and the families, 1983 arrived without answers. The case remained active, but with each passing month, hope for a resolution grew dimmer. 42 years later, the answer would come from an unexpected source: Jason Serrata, a civilian from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, who had developed a passion for solving cold cases using modern technology. Serrata had heard about the 1982 disappearance and became intrigued by the mystery. Unlike the investigators of the early 1980s, he had access to advanced mapping technology, satellite imagery, and sophisticated search equipment. Most importantly, he had something the original investigation may have lacked: the ability to systematically search bodies of water. Using detailed maps and historical records, Serrata began analyzing the route the 3 men might have taken that December night. He studied the road networks connecting Chocowinity to the areas where the men lived, looking for waterways that intersected with possible travel routes. One location kept drawing his attention: Jack's Creek, a waterway that runs through Washington, North Carolina, just a short distance from Chocowinity. Jack's Creek made logical sense as a search location. The winding rural roads near the creek would have been poorly lit in 1982, and winter weather conditions could have made driving treacherous. If the men had taken a wrong turn or encountered an emergency, the creek was positioned along a route they might reasonably have traveled. Serrata's approach was methodical and modern. He deployed a remote-controlled solar boat equipped with sophisticated sonar equipment into Jack's Creek. This technology allowed him to scan the creek bottom systematically, looking for any anomalies that might indicate the presence of a submerged vehicle. The sonar readings revealed something extraordinary: a large, car-shaped object resting on the creek bottom. The shape and size were consistent with a 1970s automobile, and its position suggested it had been there for decades. Serrata immediately contacted the Washington Police Department with his findings. Law enforcement responded quickly to Serrata's discovery. The Washington Police Department, working with the Sydney dive team, began the complex process of investigating what lay beneath the murky waters of Jack's Creek. Captain John Scott Rose, Jr. of the Sydney dive team described the challenging conditions. The object had been submerged for so long that it was barely recognizable as a vehicle. On February 9, 2024, investigators made a crucial discovery. A car axle was recovered from the creek. This tangible piece of evidence confirmed that a vehicle was indeed submerged in the location Serrata had identified. The Washington Police Department immediately began the process of draining the area to facilitate a more thorough recovery operation. The recovery process took 2 full days of intensive work. Pumping equipment was brought in to lower the water level, and specialized recovery vehicles were positioned to extract what remained of the automobile. As the water receded, the outline of the submerged car became clearer, though decades underwater had taken their toll on the vehicle's condition. When the car was finally lifted from Jack's Creek, investigators found themselves looking at the rusted, deteriorated remains of what had once been a 1975 Chevrolet Camaro. The moment investigators were able to access the vehicle's identification numbers, decades of uncertainty came to an end. Despite the extensive deterioration caused by 42 years underwater, the car's VIN number was still readable. When cross-referenced with missing vehicle records from 1982, the match was unmistakable. This was William Clifton's 1975 Chevrolet Camaro. The discovery sent shockwaves through the Washington Police Department and the broader Beaufort County community. Chief Phil L. Rawlinson had worked in law enforcement long enough to know that cold cases this old rarely see resolution. The fact that the car had been found intact in a location that made geographical sense felt almost miraculous. But the car was just the beginning of the discovery. Inside the deteriorated vehicle, investigators found human remains. The passage of time and the underwater environment had naturally affected the condition of these remains, but their presence confirmed what families had feared and hoped to know for over 4 decades. William Clifton, David McMicken, and Michael Norman had never left that car. The position and condition of the remains suggested that all 3 men had been in the vehicle when it entered the water. This evidence pointed toward a tragic accident rather than foul play, finally answering one of the most persistent questions that had haunted the investigation for decades. Forensic experts were called in to carefully recover and analyze the remains. The process required extreme sensitivity and precision. These weren't just pieces of evidence, but the physical remains of sons, fathers, and friends who had been mourned and missed for over 40 years. Each step of the recovery was documented meticulously, ensuring that families would have answers and closure. DNA sampling became the key to providing definitive identification. Chief Rawlinson explained that genetic material would be extracted from the remains and compared against DNA samples collected from family members of the 3 missing men. While the process would take time, investigators expressed confidence that the remains would be confirmed as those of Clifton, McMicken, and Norman. The location of the discovery provided crucial insights into what likely happened that December night in 1982. Jack's Creek runs along roads that would have been logical routes for the men to take while traveling home. The rural roads in the area were poorly lit, and December weather conditions in North Carolina can be unpredictable. Fog, ice, or simply unfamiliarity with the exact road layout could have contributed to a tragic accident. Investigators theorized that the men may have taken an unfamiliar route or encountered hazardous driving conditions that caused them to lose control of the vehicle. The Camaro likely left the roadway and plunged into Jack's Creek, where it sank quickly beneath the surface. In 1982, without the advanced search technologies and underwater recovery capabilities available today, finding a submerged vehicle in the area's numerous waterways would have been extremely difficult. The discovery also highlighted how water searches have evolved since the 1980s. The sonar technology and remote-controlled boats used by Jason Serrata simply didn't exist when the original investigation was conducted. What took Serrata a matter of hours to locate had remained hidden from professional searchers for over 4 decades. The discovery in Jack's Creek brought an end to one of Beaufort County's longest-running mysteries. But it also marked the beginning of a new chapter for the families who had waited over 4 decades for answers. Chief Phil L. Rawlinson's statement captured the magnitude of the moment. This case has endured in the minds of Beaufort County residents since December 10, 1982. The resolution provided not just answers to 3 specific families, but closure to an entire community that had been haunted by the disappearance. For the families of William Clifton, David McMicken, and Michael Norman, the discovery was bittersweet. While they had long suspected their loved ones were deceased, having confirmation and recovering their remains allowed for proper closure and burial. After 42 years of not knowing, they finally had answers to the questions that had tormented them. Their sons, fathers, and brothers hadn't abandoned them or chosen to disappear. They had been victims of a tragic accident. The case highlighted significant advances in investigative technology and techniques. Jason Serrata's success where professional investigators had failed wasn't due to superior skills or dedication, but rather access to technology that hadn't existed in 1982. His remote-controlled sonar boat, satellite mapping, and systematic approach to water searches represented tools that are now standard in missing persons investigations, but were science fiction 4 decades ago. The Washington Police Department and other law enforcement agencies studying the case recognized important lessons for future investigations. The systematic searching of waterways along possible travel routes, the use of sonar technology, and the involvement of civilian experts with specialized equipment all became talking points for improving cold case investigations. The resolution also demonstrated the value of civilian involvement in cold cases. Serrata's fresh perspective, combined with modern technology and personal dedication, accomplished what decades of professional investigation had not. His success story has inspired other amateur investigators and highlighted how public-private cooperation can solve seemingly impossible cases. Local media coverage of the discovery brought renewed attention to other unsolved missing persons cases in the region. Families of other missing individuals reached out to law enforcement agencies, hoping that similar technological approaches might provide answers to their own decades-old questions. The case's resolution after 42 years sent a powerful message to families dealing with missing loved ones. Time doesn't necessarily mean that answers will never come. Advances in technology, new investigative approaches, and the dedication of both professionals and civilians can breathe new life into the coldest of cases. For Beaufort County residents, particularly those who remembered the 3 men and the massive search efforts of 1982, the discovery provided a sense of completion to a story that had remained unfinished for their entire adult lives. The story of William Clifton, David McMicken, and Michael Norman reminds us that behind every missing persons case are real families enduring unimaginable uncertainty. For 42 years, parents aged and died without knowing what happened to their sons. Siblings grew old wondering about brothers who never came home. Children grew up with only stories about fathers they barely remembered. Their case also demonstrates how tragedy can strike in the most ordinary moments. 3 friends leaving a bar on a December night in 1982 were simply living their lives, making routine decisions that millions of people make every day. The difference between arriving home safely and disappearing forever can be measured in split seconds. A moment of inattention, an icy patch of road, or an unfamiliar turn in the darkness. Jason Serrata's dedication to solving this cold case represents the best of human nature. Someone who had no personal connection to these men or their families chose to invest his time, energy, and resources in finding answers. His success proves that sometimes the most important breakthroughs come from unexpected sources, armed with determination and the right tools. The technological gap between 1982 and 2024 is staggering when viewed through the lens of this case. What seemed impossibly lost to the investigators of the early 1980s was discoverable in hours using modern equipment. This reality offers hope to families of missing persons everywhere. Cases that seem hopelessly cold may simply be waiting for the right technology or approach. As we reflect on this 42-year mystery, we should remember William Clifton, David McMicken, and Michael Norman not as statistics or case numbers, but as men who were loved and missed every single day since that December night. Their family's patience and hope across more than 4 decades is a testament to the enduring power of love. If this case moved you, please like this video and subscribe for more investigative stories. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think there are other cold cases that could be solved with modern technology? Sometimes the answers we seek are closer than we imagine, waiting beneath the surface for someone brave enough to look.